r/AskReddit, what is your r/NOSLEEP story that actually happened? This was a couple of years ago, but it still freaks me out, and I'm a fairly astute 47-year-old man. My wife and one of my sons had left for Panama City Beach about a day prior, and my oldest son was staying with his cousin in North Carolina for a week, so I was alone in the house. For the sake of context, I had some work business that was keeping me busy, so I had told the wife I'd catch up with them after 2 days or so. I'm sitting downstairs, living room couch, watching Family Guy as I usually do, when I suddenly begin to hear what sounds like footsteps just above me. That would have been my bedroom. I think nothing of it first, and simply chalk it up to being alone in a house, at night, no wife for comfort. They continue once again several minutes later. It almost sounded as if our cat, a large Maine Coon, was running back and forth. Just as I comfort myself with this assumption, the cat enters my peripheral vision, strolls into the living room, jumps up onto the couch beside me. The footsteps continue. I'm paranoid, but not frightened just yet. I decide to investigate. I climb the steps and slowly turn my head to look into my bedroom. Nothing there, well, not at first. I stare into the blackness for a moment and start to think I'm being a bit silly, but as I turn to go back down the steps out of my peripheral vision, I see a very faint image of what I believe was a small girl in a dress run towards the doorway, then turn back around. This was accompanied by the same footsteps I had heard before. I cannot explain the chills I felt, nor can I describe how fast I bolted it back down the steps and into the living room. At this point, my heart is racing, my goosebumps have goosebumps, and I've nearly pissed in my checkered pajama pants. I had one more day of work. I called the office, gave them a tale, and left for Panama City at 6 a.m. I did not sleep. So me and my cousin, who is maybe 4 years older than me, we're playing by the woods in an oldie baseball field in Virginia. She hit the ball pretty far, so naturally we went to look for it. We could see a pretty cool old trail and found the baseball laying in the middle of it. We decided to follow it and came across this old cabin. It was one room and had green doors and shutters. Naturally we were like, awesome. New fave spot. We didn't go inside, but every day we came back. Something there just creeped us out. There was canned food sitting everywhere and looked like someone lived inside, but it was really dilapidated. One day we came back and finally went inside. It stank like high heaven, and out of the corner this man-shaped thing started yelling at us to get out and never come back, and we were already creeper out just from looking inside, so we ran and went the whole mile back to the baseball field and ran all the way up the road home. We didn't get the courage to go back until 3 days later, armed with baseball bats. We were very intimidating as a 9 and 13, almost 14-year-old. When we got back to the exact spot where it had been, there was nothing but a big rectangle where the house used to be. It was like it had just up and evaporated. All that was left was a foundation. We looked and looked for signs of a fire, but there was nothing anywhere. We never went back to that spot again and figured we just imagined the house being there. Now as I'm older, I'm not so sure. Maybe we crossed the line and saw stuff in another realm, who knows. It was a magical looking spot in that forest. I'm 22 now and won't go back there. We moved into a new house a few months ago. As we were in the process of purchasing the house, the renter who was living in it died unexpectedly of natural causes in his mid-40s. He died right in the middle of the living room. Shortly after, we move into the house, and almost immediately our 2-year-old daughter starts talking about the ghost that lives in our house. Now let's be real here, she is 2 and 2-year-olds are very impressionable. Halloween had recently passed, and she had this Halloween-themed picture book that she loved to read, so it's entirely possible that all this talk of ghosts was just coming from looking through that book on a regular basis. Still, she was always telling me that the ghost was in her playhouse in the basement, or that the ghost was on the stairs, or that the ghost was standing in the corner. She never seemed to be afraid of the ghost, and considered him to be her friend, so I wasn't all that concerned even if there really was a ghost haunting our house. If he's a nice and helpful ghost, it could certainly be a lot worse. I would often tell the ghost that he was welcome to stay if he wanted to, but he was also welcome to go if that would make him happier. I was about 30/70ths on the ghost being real and she could see and talk to him versus the ghost being just her imagination fueled by her Halloween book. Until one day, when we were going out to the car to go to daycare in the morning. It was still dark out, and rainy. My daughter told me that the ghost was on the back deck, and then she told me that today was the ghost's birthday and she wanted to sing him happy birthday. Once again, I mostly disregarded what she was saying, as she is birthday obsessed and has in the past made us sing happy birthday to Mickey Mouse, a bowl of fruit snacks, and the bathroom. So we sang and wished the ghost a happy birthday and went on with our lives. Later that day, out of pure curiosity, I looked up the obituary of the man who had died in our house. And wouldn't you know it? It was his ducking birthday. Babysitting one night for my neighbors. Their house has always sketched me out. They have 2 kids. One is around 5 years and the other is around 9 months. The first part happened while putting the 5-year-old down for a nap. My neighbors have a camera set up in her room so you can see her and make sure she's sleeping. I watched it for a little bit. She was asleep for about 10 minutes then abruptly got up. She stared at the other side of the bed and talked to nothing for a little bit. After about 4 minutes and feeling a bit sketched out already, the kid quickly turns her head towards the camera and just stares. I had had enough of that, so I just sat down on the couch and watched some Netflix. The same night I went to put the 9-month-old down. She wouldn't stop crying, but I decided to leave her for a while because usually the kid tires out and falls asleep. Anyways, I went back upstairs, her room is in the basement, and turned on the baby monitor. After a while, as suspected, she stopped crying. After about 10 minutes after she stopped crying, I started hearing noises coming from the baby monitor once again, but this time, it wasn't a baby. I listened closely and heard a woman whisper singing a lullaby. I couldn't make out the sound. Once she started singing though, the baby started crying again. There was static on the monitor and the woman had stopped singing. Then the baby stopped crying. Each time the woman would start singing again, the baby would start crying. I was so ducking scared. This story is not mine, it's my grandfather's. Backstory: this takes place in West Virginia in the 20s. My grandpa is the youngest of 9 and his family is very poor. They all live in a one-room house. My grandpa's sister suddenly got sick and quickly fell into a coma. They say she had a fever and would shake and even sit up in the middle of the night even though she was not conscious. She got progressively worse over the next few days and needed some sort of help. My grandpa and his oldest sister Glenna stayed behind while the rest of the family went to the neighbor's house 10 miles down the road for some food and medicine. As soon as the family got home that night, their mom went to the sister's bed and started to put a cold cloth on her head. Immediately her eyes flew open for the first time in days and she looked her mother right in the eyes and said, "The Lord wants Glenna." She fell back and twitched before going back into unconsciousness. The next morning Glenna and the sister had died. The younger sister died from the fever, and Glenna died from unknown causes. My paternal grandmother died when I was 6. I lived in New York. She lived in PA. I met her maybe twice. I was 6 years old, asleep in bed one night, and for whatever reason I woke up and walked into my parents' bedroom. My father had an easy chair in one corner for reading. I sat in the chair. On the opposite wall was my father's closet. It opened, and Grandma came out and stood about 6 feet away. "I just wanted to say goodbye," she said, smiled, waved, and turned back and walked back into the closet, closing the door behind her. I went back to my room. About 2 hours later, about 6 a.m., the phone rings. It was a call from PA that Grandma Catherine had died in her sleep. My mother came to wake me up to tell me, and I said, I know. What do you mean? She came to say goodbye last night. She made me repeat the story 3 times, and then told me never, ever to tell my father that story. And I never did. I worked night shift as a palliative care RN in a very big, very old nursing home. It's important to note that this home and the religious organization that ran it are currently part of the Royal Inquiry into the institutional response to the abuse of children. The nurses that had worked there for 30+ years used to delight in telling younger staff that when it was used as a children's home they used to bury children that died in the rose garden. This old rose garden was apparently under a newer wing of the home. At least 4 times in my 2 years of working there we would have elderly, close to death patients wake, totally lucid in the dead of night and ask us, please tell the little girl to get out of my room, or please get that little boy out of the corner, he's looking at me. Being in this huge, dark, old, creepy building that had a very awful history and then that happening? Fuck that, I would never do my rounds alone when it happened, it was terrifying. It made my blood run cold and I'd get a friend to work with me the rest of the night. I was not the only person this happened to, either. It was a regular occurrence. Lived in this dark, creepyish rental house from 4th to 7th grade. I don't know if the house was actually haunted or not, but my mom, my sister, and me always got these creepy feelings around various areas of the house, particularly the closet and bathroom in the master bedroom. Anyways, my sister, who was a little bit younger than me, would tell me about how she saw the disembodied head of a woman floating above my bed at night looking at me sleep. I admit, at night, I would get the eerie feeling that something I couldn't see was watching me, but trying to be the tough 9-year-old, I brushed off what she was saying as the ramblings of a 7-year-old. Nothing really happened for months and I even forgot what my sister said about the disembodied head, until one night I was in a particularly deep sleep when I suddenly heard the blood-curdling scream of a woman right outside my ear. At first, I thought it was my mom or sister messing with me, but when I glanced across the room, I saw my sister sleeping in bed and went to my mom's room and saw her sleeping as well, and there were no other woman in the house that could have possibly done it. If that doesn't creep you out, something creepier happened to my sister. In 6th grade, I was away at science camp for a week, so my sister had the room to herself for the entire week. One of those nights, she woke up and saw me standing in the doorway. At first, she thought that I had come back early from camp, so she spent about a minute asking me why I had come back from camp so early and how it was. Thing is, while she was talking to what she thought was me, it didn't say anything, and all it did was stare at her from the doorway, which gave her a cold chill up her spine. Once she realized it wasn't me, she said the thing pretending to be me gave her a creepy smile and waved at her before turning around and walking down the hallway towards the master bedroom. Well, thanks.